Hello, I am Enrique Barra, and in this video we are going to see how to integrate React and Redux. In the first place, remember that React is just a library for the user interface, for the views. And what do we need for this library, for React? We only need the data to render the views and the possibility to modify that data. That data is the state, that will be the Redux state. Redux is the architecture that will complete React, and we will add this one-way data flow that Flux proposes, because Redux is just a Flux implementation. Flux is an architecture also that Facebook proposes. So we have React for the user interface, and React needs this state and the possibility to modify it. And Redux will provide it, provide the state and provide the possibility to modify it, and will wrap the logic into reducers. Okay, so let's see how do we integrate it. Well, we need to transfer for Redux to React this state and the actions to modify it. Okay, so in React we will receive this state. How? As props, because we want to keep the state immutability. So what is the most similar thing in React? The props. So we will receive some props, will render the application, and will receive the possibility to emit, to dispatch actions that will get to Redux, that will modify the state again, and we call React again. Well, for this we will create a Redux provider, and we will have a library, an npm package that is called React Redux. Well, one slight difference in the beginning. Well, our whole state, I'm telling you, that will be into Redux. It will pass the state as props to React, but we can keep slight parts of the state into React. How? If the component is active or not, or if we have a drop-down open, that thing is only in the user interface, is not important data that we should store, for example, in a database. That's things that I don't want to remember if I want to restore the state or save the state or undo or redo. So that state can be kept on React, and the rest, the important data, will be into Redux. So sometimes we have two different states, other times we only have Redux state. Okay, let's start with the library. The React Redux library, remember that Redux is framework agnostic. We can use it with vanilla JavaScript, Vue, Angular, or any other framework or library. So we will need a component, an extra component, a piece, a package to integrate Redux with React. That is called React Redux, and is an npm package. This library has an API that provides a provider and a connect method. The provider is a special component, a React component, that receives the Redux store, like this, and has a child that will be our application. So the provider, we will pass it as a prop, as an attribute, the store, our Redux store, and we'll have as child our root component that is usually called app. And the connect method will join our components to the store. Okay, so we will have a map state to props method or function that receives the state and returns the props. So you can see that what we are doing with this provider and with this connect method is what I told you before, that we need to join React and Redux. So we pass the state here. The state is transformed into props that will be connected to our application. And this is what we will have to export, because this method connect will return a new component. Okay? How do we use it? Well, we will use both things, the provider and the connect method, to either create a new component and connect the state, as I tell you. Steps. The first place, install Redux and React Redux. Define the new state, the initial state, into a constant file. Create the actions that can be done into the application. create the reducers, create the Redux provider component, this new component that will have the provider inside, modify index.js to render this component, this new component, instead of our app, because of our app will be inside this component, and finally modify our app with this connect and map state to props, just to map the Redux state into our application. Well, let's see it with an example. We have a to-do list like this. What do we need to render this interface? Well, we need this information, that is the state that we have to define. Of course, it's just a JavaScript object with a to-do array and a visibility filter. With this information, I can render this interface. Of course, with a little of CSS or Sass or whatever. Let's start. Actions. What are the actions that I can do in my applications, in this application? Well, add a to-do, set visibility filter, or toggle a to-do. These are action creators. They only return a JavaScript object with a type and more data that I will need to modify the state. So the actions in this application are quite simple. The reducers. Well, we will have two reducers. Remember that the state has two parts, visibility filter and the to-dos. We will have a to-do reducer and a visibility filter reducer. Both will be combined with combine reducers. We will combine and will be this function will return a root reducer that we call global state. Okay, the to-do reducer, we have a to-do or toggle to-do type of actions that will be attended by the to-do reducer, and the visibility filter reducer will attend the action set visibility filter. Some actions can be attended by several reducers, but in this case it is very simple and they are split like this, but you can add an add to do possibility here or other combination. Well, the Redux provider. This seems like very complicated, but it's always the same. We usually copy and paste this kind of component. This is just a component that has a constructor to set the initial state and configure the store. The store is configured with a create store method that Redux provides us, that receives the global state, the root reducer, and the initial state. And this is for hot reloading, always copy and paste. And this component has a render method with the provider that receives the store, remember, and our app inside. We can copy and paste everything and we will be able to add here our app or our initial state right here. Okay, so it seems quite complicated, but it's just conceptually a new component that we have to add to join, okay, with this provider, but we call it Redux provider to use it what Redux gives us to add more things like this hot module replacement and the initial state. Okay, so this is just an extra component where we will wrap our application here. Okay, and we will have now to modify index, because this is the component that we are going to render. We are not going to render our app anymore because we render Redux provider and it has inside our app. And finally, we have to modify our app to connect. Remember, we have done the provider part and we now have to connect the Redux state to props. So we have a method, a function, map state to props, to return to-dos and visibility filter. And we export it because, remember, connect method gives us a new component. So we don't export app, but what we get with the connect. There is another slight change that will depend on our app, is that now we don't access the state because the state is in Redux and we access props. Redux will give us props here with the same name if we want, Usually we will do it like this, but now to access the to-dos or the visibility filter, we will use this.props.todos or this.props.visibility filter, these two variables or properties. And to call or dispatch an action, we can use this.props.dispatch and the action that we also import from actions here. So we will have to modify our application, and we will have everything integrated from the new Redux provider component to our application that has been modified with the connect. So thank you very much, and see you in the next video.